What is up, guys? If you're watching this video, you want to know how to build the absolute best crit-based fighter in Baldur's Gate 3. Well, that's exactly what I'm going to be showing you in this video. I'm going to be breaking this video into 3 parts: the simple and easy to learn leveling process, the total itemization you need to make this build fully come online, and then an actual real-world demonstration of just how powerful this build is against one of the bosses in the game. So that's what you're going to be getting in this video. I want to explain to you that this build is one of the simplest and most effective builds I've ever played, and I really think this is an amazing build for beginners or intermediates, or just people that want to beat the game in a simple Hulk smash fashion. So I really hope you like the build. Please hit that like button. Please share this video with your friends if you do find it helpful. And now let's not waste any time and get right into the build. So here we are, guys, at the leveling part of the guide. This is an incredibly simple character to play, and it's an incredibly simple character to level up. You're going to start off by choosing your class, which is going to be fighter. In terms of fighting style, what you want to do is you want to take 2-weapon fighting, and you want to eventually take archery. Now, I will say, if you are willing to respec, it is actually better to have defense in this game at the beginning and then respec a little bit later on. The reason being is defense is going to help you when we don't have our daggers, but when we actually play in the late game, 2-weapon fighting and archery is what we want. So I'll leave that up to your choice if you want to respec. If you do not want to respec, just get 2-weapon fighting for now. In terms of abilities, we are going to have our strength at 15. We are going to have our dexterity at 17 with our +2 modifier. And we are going to have our constitution at 16 with our +1 modifier. Intelligence, wisdom, and charisma are not important in this build, and so they have been dumped down to 8. In terms of skill proficiencies, I would highly recommend you get your athletics and your acrobatics. The other choices really do not help you in any conceivable way, so those are what you should be choosing. Now let's go on to level 3. So here we are at level 3. Level 3 is going to be incredibly simple. Choose your subclass, choose champion. That's it. Hit accept. And we are on to level 4. Now at level 4, we are going to be taking our first feat. Feats are very simple in this game, guys. What we are going to be doing for our first 2 feats is choosing ASI, or ability improvement. And in this ability improvement, our goal is to get dexterity up to 20. Now, the reason we are going to be using this is not a build that requires elixirs of strength. What we are going to be doing is using finesse-based weapons, which use either the higher of your strength or dexterity modifier. In this particular case, we are going to try to boost our dexterity as quickly as possible. Now, one thing you can do is, if you do have hags here, you can actually boost your dexterity up to 18, and you can boost your constitution up to 17, and you'll see how that's going to help you later. I'm just assuming here you do not have hags here, or you used it on another ally. In that case, just continue to boost your dexterity up. So here we are at level 6, guys. Again, very simple. Go to feats, choose ASI, ability improvement. All you need to do here is make sure your dexterity is 20. That is the most important stat you have to worry about. If you did have hags here, you could now boost your constitution up to 17. Use the hags here and have dexterity 20, constitution 17. Strength is fine. We can keep it at 15. We're not worried about it because, like I said, we will be utilizing daggers. All other stats really don't matter too much. So here we are, guys, at level 8. This is going to be the third feat that you're going to be choosing. You have still leveled pure fighter up to this point. Remember, it's a champion fighter build. All we're going to be doing here is we're going to be going down and we're going to be picking sharpshooter. So this build does use bows. It is a significant amount of bow usage. So you do want to pick sharpshooter here. It's going to help your bow damage a lot. So here we are at level 10, guys. And here we are going to be choosing our second fighting style. I've already talked about this a little bit at the start of the video. You definitely do want to have 2-weapon fighting. Now you can choose either archery or defense. I personally do like archery because getting that +2 to range weapon attacks is really nice. Defense is also something you can choose. Alright, so here we are at level 12. We are going to be adding a class, and we are going to be multi-classing into Warlock. The specific subclass of Warlock you choose is extremely important, guys. It is very important that you choose the right subclass. You do not want to choose Fiend or the Archfey. You want to choose GOO, or the Great Old One, is specifically what you want to use. And the reason is when you land a critical hit against a creature, that creature and any nearby enemies must succeed a wisdom saving throw or become frightened until the end of the next turn. We are building this whole build around getting as many crits as possible, so this is incredibly, incredibly useful and way better than just getting an extra feat and getting an extra level into fighter. In terms of cantrips, it doesn't honestly matter. I would recommend you get Eldritch Blast. Your other cantrip really doesn't have any importance. Spells, I wouldn't say they're very important here. You're not going to be casting that many spells, but my two recommendations are the Armour of Agathys and Hellish Rebuke. I think Hellish Rebuke is probably one of the best ones you can get here because you can use it as a reaction, and basically if an enemy hits you, you can hit him with Hellish Rebuke. Armours of Agathys helps you a little bit, but it's not that big of a deal. But honestly, guys, the spells are kind of an afterthought. This is mainly for the subclass, the Great Old One, and the feature Mortal Reminder, getting that frightened onto critical hits. So that's it, guys. The leveling process is done. Now let's move on to itemization. So here we are, guys, at itemization, and I'm going to be talking you through every single piece of gear that you're going to be using on this build, starting off with the helmet slot. For the helmet slot, you are going to be wanting to use Savrock's Horned Helmet. You gain Dark Vision up to a range of 3 meters, which isn't important, but the main thing is the number you need to roll a critical hit when attacking is reduced by 1. That is literally what you're going to be seeing on almost every item that we are going to be using. This effect can stack. You cannot be frightened as well, which is really, really nice, and Constitution saving throws +1. But really, it's the critical hit here that is so important. In terms of the Cloak slot, I would highly recommend the Thunder Skin Cloak. When a creature with Reverberation deals damage to the wearer, the creature needs to make a Constitution saving throw or become dazed. You'll see how this is important in a minute. In terms of our main chest piece slot, we are going to be using the Ballast Armor. Now, chest piece slot does actually quite a few that you can use. You could also basically put heavy armor onto your crit fighter here, but I do prefer the Ballast Armor, and the reason is enemies within 2 meters become vulnerable to piercing damage unless they are resistant or immune to it. This is quite important because you're going to see that a lot of the weapons that we are going to be using use piercing damage. So the Ballast Armor, even though it is quite hard to get, is definitely worth it. It's an incredible, incredible chest piece, and I would highly recommend it. In terms of your gloves, I use the Gloves of Belligerent Skies. When the wearer deals thunder damage, lightning damage, or radiant damage, inflict 2 turns of reverberation. This is going to be specifically applicable when we actually use our bow and we are going to be shooting lightning-based arrows. So we will be getting that lightning-based damage and then inflicting reverberation upon our target. So use the Gloves of Belligerent Skies. In terms of boots, we're using the Boots of Stormy Clamor. When the wearer inflicts a condition upon a hostile creature, they also inflict 2 turns of reverberation. We frighten creatures all the time, so you will be stacking reverberation quite a bit. Boots of Stormy Clamor, really, really good boot slot, and I think probably best in slot in this particular build. In terms of the amulet slot, I think there's a single amulet that's better than anything else when you're running this build, which is Once Per Long Rest. When scoring a critical hit on a humanoid, the wearer can paralyze the target for 2 turns. Incredibly useful against bosses or other large enemies. This is just crazy good, and that is the Surgeon's Subjugation Amulet. So that's what I would recommend in your amulet slot. Rings, there is a little bit here that you can do. You can do several different things. I recommend using the Caustic Band and the Risky Ring. The Risky Ring I would 100% have on at all times. It is very important to note that when you do have the Risky Ring on, you do not want to be the party face. You do not want to be initiating dialogue. But in terms of actually combat, this makes it where you will almost guaranteed to hit when you strike. So I would highly recommend having the Risky Ring. Caustic Band, your weapons deal 2 acid damage. That's just free damage every time you're hitting, and you're hitting a lot in this build. Now, one thing that I want to talk about is that in this particular guide, in this particular playthrough of my game, I missed out on one of the bows, and that is the Dead Shot. I'm using right now the Vicious Short Bow, but in your bow slot, really the Dead Shot is the one that's best in slot. It will reduce your critical hit by 1 again, and you would be pairing that up with lightning arrows or arrows of many targets. So both of these are extremely, extremely good when you have the Dead Shot. In this one, I'm having the Vicious Short Bow, which is another great option you have, which is when you land a critical hit, this deals an additional 7 damage. So use the Vicious Short Bow, or if you have it, definitely use the Dead Shot in terms of bows. Now we're going to be talking about our main weapon slots that we're using, and we're using 2 here. We're using the Knife of the Undermountain King, and we're using Bloodthirst. Reduces the number you need to hit a critical hit by 1. So again, this stacks with all of the other items you already have that does it. So when you roll 2 damage or less, you also re-roll the dice, taking the higher result. So not only do you reduce that number that you need a critical hit, but if you roll 1s and 2s, you now re-roll, so you're more likely to hit criticals again. You also have advantage on attack rolls against lightly or heavily obscured targets when using this blade. That's not super important. What is super important is this is a finesse-based weapon, so it will use your dexterity modifier. Now we have the Bloodthirst, which you have in your offhand. Now it's important, in my opinion, to actually have this in your offhand and have the Knife of the Undermountain King in your main hand, because this legendary dagger has different attributes depending on if it's an offhand or if it's a main hand weapon. So you want this in your offhand. The main reason you're getting this is the number you need to roll a critical hit when attacking is reduced by 1. This effect can stack. Basically, again, we're reducing that critical hit, guys. We're reducing that critical hit. And then it has in the offhand only when you have it. When a creature misses you with a melee strike, you may retaliate and gain true strike. Also, armor class +1 as a bound weapon. Really, really great. Now, what you can do in this build, guys, is you can hit with these 2 daggers when you're close up and deal crazy damage. And then if you had the dead shot, you would be shooting with the arrow of many targets and arrows of lightning and inflicting all of these conditions like reverberation. But the main thing I also want to show you guys that is something you could do that could make this build even stronger, but it is kind of convoluted in how you have to do it, is you can also put Ring of Spiteful Thunder on. When the wearer deals thunder damage to a reverberating creature, it becomes dazed unless it succeeds a Constitution saving throw. Now, I did not particularly do this, and I do think it's kind of out of the scope of the guide because it is kind of, not a hack, but it is definitely something that is kind of difficult to do. But what you can do is you can actually get a Drakethroat Glaive. It's a large glaive, and what it will allow you to do is it elementally infuse a weapon. So what you can do is you can actually put one of these weapons, like the Knife of the Undermountain King, on the ground. You can actually use the Drakethroat Glaive to actually imbue it with thunder damage. Then when you're actually doing thunder damage, you could have this ring on here, Ring of Spiteful Thunder, where when you deal thunder damage to a reverberating creature, it becomes dazed. Now remember, guys, you would be having on the Gloves of Belligerent Skies, so when you deal thunder damage, you inflict 2 turns of reverberation, and Boots of Stormy Clamor. So your enemies are going to have reverberation on, almost guaranteed. So hopefully that explains itemization. Now, one thing that I do want to note is you do not need Cloud Giant Strength Potions. You do not need Hill Giant Strength Potions. A lot of people were asking for me to do a build with no Strength Potions whatsoever, and this build does not need any Strength Potion. However, I would highly recommend using the Elixir of Viciousness. When you have the Elixir of Viciousness activated, the number you need to roll a critical hit is reduced by 1 again. And all of these really are important, guys. The more this stacks, the more important it is. Like, it really, really helps you. Every single number you can reduce it makes a big, big difference. So now let's actually see how this build acts in a real-life combat scenario. Alright, so I wanted to quickly explain how you should use this build and actually show you what the damage is like in a real-life combat scenario on one of the hardest bosses in the game, Savrock. In this particular build, I would highly recommend going in second. This is not a build that you really want to initiate. You generally want to actually let another character come in first, deal some damage, take some aggro, and then actually come in. But you can see in one turn how much damage this is doing. We've paralyzed our target, and we are hitting crits every single time. And honestly, guys, that's really why I like to play this build in a melee range. You can just absolutely destroy people in close quarter combat, and it's really, really that simple. Now, another option you do have is to always hit with range. Hit with your bow, the dead shot, arrow of many targets, or arrows of lightning is what I would highly recommend. And it really is that simple, which is why I love playing this build, because I think it's a great build for beginners. You go up close to things and you hit things, and it really is that simple and that effective. As you were seeing, we were hitting crits almost every single time we hit. So there you have it, guys. I've showed you the leveling, the itemization, and I've showed you this build in action. I really hope this has helped you. Please let me know any questions or concerns you have down in the comments, and I will respond to every question and try to help you in any concern you may have, because I really want you to enjoy this incredible build. I would humbly ask, if you did like this, please share it with your friends, and please consider subscribing to the channel, hitting that notification bell, and perhaps joining my membership tier. It really helps me make these videos. They do take a lot of time. Any memberships, any donations would be much appreciated, because this does take me a lot of time each week. I really hope you've enjoyed this, guys. I have so enjoyed making this build guide for you, and I will see you in the next video.